congratulations to Errol Spence Jr. and Sean Porter. More on that and why I'm clapping in just a little bit. First, welcome to Box Talks and Ring Walks. I'm your host, Jesse, and we're going to be going through everything that happened in the boxing world. Well, important things that happened in the boxing world over the weekend, some news, and what to look forward to next weekend. So, without further ado, on Friday, September 27th, we had Daniel Dubois headline a card against Ebenezer Tete. Not a whole lot to talk about. Daniel Dubois is an up-and-comer in the heavyweight division. He's got power. He's got frightful power. He knocked out Ebenezer Tete in the first round. Very exciting. He's a prospect. We're not expecting him to go to be fighting really good guys so far, right? Ebenezer Tete was not a challenge, and he wasn't supposed to be a challenge. He was supposed to be a guy to put in front of Dubois to build that profile, bring that resume up, and Dubois executed. He knocked him out in the first round. He showed that he's better than this middling level that Tete belongs in. So Dubois is starting to move up into contender territory. He's sort of like teetering on the prospect contender fence, and we should be excited to see him enter that contender and, maybe even champion status in heavyweight, depending on how his career goes. But in a few years, he'll probably get a title shot. Maybe even, depending on how fast they want to rush his career. They could wait years to give him a title shot, or they could put him up against a top contender right now. That's a risk I don't think is worth taking. I think just give him some more time. The thing with Dubois is because I watched him fight Tete, and he knocked him out in the first round, so there wasn't any time to really have complaints, but Dubois had no defense. And I think it is important the level of competition you go against determines how good you are, right? If you're going up against somebody who is not that good, you don't need to be at your best. When you're going up against the champ, the best of the best in the division, you have to be 100%. So I think Dubois is in that category where if he goes up against a champ or a top contender, he'll look better. But against Tete, he did not have much defense, and I was like, gosh, any one of these top heavyweights would punish him for what he's doing right now. But I think that's sort of just it was an easy fight, and he was taking it easy, and I hope that's not bad habits. And if it is bad habits, I hope that's something that his trainer saw and says, hey, we're not gonna ever win a belt if you fight like this in a championship fight. But I think more likely than not, it's just an easy fight, and he was taking it easy, which is perfectly fine. He knocked him out in the first round. So whatever I have to say beyond that is like, well, he did his job. He executed, right? You can't ask for a better showcase of a prospect contender level guy than a first round knockout. That's all Dubois needed to do. So we're happy with how that turned out. We'll see what happens with Dubois in the future. He's got power. He could be a big thing in boxing, or some of these bad habits that I saw could be the definition of him, and then he won't be a big name in heavyweight. We're just going to have to wait and see. But it's exciting to have these guys in heavyweight, which is already an exciting division. Young guys like Dubois coming up means that we at least have the potential for it to stay exciting for years and years, and that's what we like. So I want Dubois to do well for the sake of the heavyweight division. I have no loyalty to him, but for the sake of the heavyweight, I'd love to have him rise up and be a really powerful young guy in the division. Not a whole lot happening on that card. Yesterday, last night, Saturday, September 28th, we had the big one, a pay-per-view, a Fox pay-per-view. We had Errol Spence Jr., Sean Porter, welterweight unification. We talked about this last week, how exciting these unifications are, and how it's almost a pick'em fight. Spence is definitely the favorite, but Porter is no joke, and we saw that tonight. So before I get into that specific fight, we're going to talk about some of the undercard matches that were taking place. I'm going to start off with Mario Barrios winning I believe it was unanimous decision against Batir Akhmedov. It was a unanimous decision. That's disappointing. So the reason I say that's disappointing is because this was for the WBA super lightweight title, which, if I remember correctly, that's Regis Prograis' title, and they took it from him so he could finish the WBSS. Yeah, that looks like it's right. So Barrios goes up against Akhmedov for the super lightweight title, or junior welterweight, 140 pounds, whatever you want to call it. And I mentioned this one last week. Akhmedov, I said, was a contender. Barrios is a contender too. They're fighting for a world title, but I call them contenders. You'll notice that as a theme on this show. I'm probably going to call guys that you consider above contender level contenders, and guys that you consider above prospect level prospect, because I like to be a little bit tougher on guys than most people. So yeah, Akhmedov's probably more of a prospect, and Barrios is a contender, and I was worried about them fighting each other, but I thought it would be fun. And it was fun. Barrios clearly, to me, won the first 4 rounds, and he knocked down Akhmedov like a flash knockdown in the 4th. Akhmedov went down, and his glove touched the canvas, so it was a knockdown legitimately, but it was very, very quick. He was right back up, and he was ready to go. But he did definitely lose a point on the judges' scorecard for that. It would have definitely had to be a 10-8 round. After that, it was a 10-round fight, and after that, I gave the other 6 to Akhmedov. I'm sorry. I gave 5 through 11 to Akhmedov, and I gave the 12th to Barrios. Some of those were close. So I had it scored a draw, and I had it scored a draw only because of the knockdown. But Barrios won the unanimous decision, and I was really upset about this when it first was announced, but then with the knockdown is the big thing, and then the other thing is some of those rounds were pretty close, so I can't be too upset about it. I'd be a little bit more at ease if it was a split decision. And also, if you look at the judges' actual scorecards, they're not close. They're very wide in favor of Barrios, and that I don't like. But usually I'm the type of person to say, if the decision is good, I don't care about what the actual scorecards say. I do, but decisions in boxing are already so bad that it's I'm not going to get mad about them making the right decision for the wrong reasons. I'm already too upset about bad decisions. So it's if a guy clearly won the fight and the scorecards are a little wide in his favor, I don't care. I think that kind of sucks, and that's a problem in boxing, but the fact that the decision is right is good enough for me. So I can't be too upset against Barrios because it was a close fight, but I do think I think that Akhmedov kind of got the raw end. I think that they didn't give him all the credit he deserved. I would have been happy with the draw in that fight. But now we have a super light champ in Mario Barrios, who, if Regis Prograis wants that belt back, Mario Barrios is not going to stand in his way. At least that's what I saw in the fight. This is a sport where anything can happen, but from what I watched, neither of those guys are going to... Prograis is the real deal, and neither of those guys are going to stand up to him. So, After that little bit of controversy, we had Anthony Durrell and David Benavidez fighting for the WBC Super Middleweight title, the 168-pound title. This was a really interesting fight going in. David Benavidez was the former champ. Anthony Durrell was the champ. So there's a lot of drama, a lot of build up to it. That's why it was the co-main. And it was really exciting. Durrell showed off his boxing skill at the beginning, but Benavidez kept coming forward and would be aggressive and would take points and rounds away from Durrell. And that's sort of what ended up happening, is he just started being too aggressive and taking points and taking rounds from Durrell. He would come in and he would punish him, and Durrell wouldn't throw back. So Benavidez would come and throw a flurry, probably only, hit him on 1 or 2 out of the 5 or 6 that he throws. But Durrell didn't throw anything back to show that he was okay. And then Durrell got cut pretty badly on his eyelid. It was really gross. If you're into like gruesome cuts and stuff, look it up. It's not like a Badu Jack cut or anything, but it was pretty gross. And there was a lot of worrying. There was a lot of visiting the doctor and asking the corner if he should keep going and should this continue, and they could have stopped it earlier. They ended up stopping it in the 9th round, a TKO victory for David Benavidez, who is the new WBC super middleweight champ. I think somebody mentioned unifying with Callum Smith, which everybody at 168 wants Callum Smith. He's the top guy of the division, so that makes sense. Unifications are hard to come by, though. I wouldn't expect to see that. But it would be really exciting to see David Benavidez go up against Smith. That would be a good fight. So after Benavidez scored a TKO round 9 over Durrell, we had the main event, Errol Spence Jr. against Sean Porter for the WBC and IBF welterweight titles. So a lot of hype going in this. Welterweight is hot right now, one of the best divisions in boxing at the moment, and 2 guys who are in the top 5 of the division, and both champions are about to throw down and go at it. Errol Spence going into this was the favorite. That's not to say that everybody was counting out Porter, because by no means was anybody counting out Porter, but Spence was the favorite. And everybody was saying there was going to be a dogfight. These were guys who would go in for the knockout, and that was completely correct. It was a dogfight, and it was a war. Spence sort of adopted Sean Porter's aggressive style. I think more people were expecting him to be a bit more of a boxer, but he was brawling a little bit, and he was really fighting Sean Porter's fight, which is interesting and not what I expected, but it worked for him. Porter was the aggressor for much of the fight, but Spence had his fair share of aggression as well. It was very close and very, very back and forth. Spence ended up winning a split decision over Porter, and I am happy that it was a split decision, because I think that gives a little bit of credit to Porter, because he really showed up. I think Spence had the night that everybody expected, and Porter had a better night than everybody expected, which goes into how good Errol Spence is. The fact that Porter did better than expected and Spence still won, I think shows you how big of a champ he is, how good he is. I heard some people, there are outliers who are going to say that Sean Porter won this fight. He didn't. The one judge who scored it for Porter, I don't know what that judge was smoking. But I do like, because again, the decision was right, How they got to the decision, I'm not going to complain about. Um, and I do like that Sean Porter got a little bit of credit for the great fight that he turned in. He looked great. He gave Spence a challenge, and that was the big thing. Is Spence was already the top guy in welterweight, or one of the top guys. He's already a pound for pound fighter. But Sean Porter was a huge test for him that Spence has not gotten yet. And the fact that he passed this test really brought him up in the conversation of welterweight and in the conversation of pound for pound. The problem is that both in the welterweight rankings and the pound for pound rankings, he's in competition with Terrence Crawford, which did he do enough to put him above Crawford in welterweight rankings or pound for pound rankings? No. I do not think so. I think that Terrence Crawford is the number one at 147 right now, and is the number 2 at pound for pound right now. Maybe number 1. So, great night for Spence. Great night for Spence. He is a rising star. He is a star. You know, he was a rising star several years ago. Errol Spence Jr. is a star in boxing. And it was a great fight. It might be fight of the year. There was another fight earlier this year that I think might be fight of the year, and this one is possibly as well. I'll have to go back. I am planning on at the end of the year doing like an awards show where it's like fight of the year and fighter of the year and knockout of the year and all that stuff. That's wholly just my biased opinion. But this one is definitely in the running for fight of the year. It was very good. If you missed it, try and find a way to watch it, or at least watch some highlights of it. It was very, very good. I can't wait to see what's next for Spence and what's next for Porter. Speaking of that, what is next for Spence and what is next for Sean Porter? After the fight, they were interviewing Errol Spence, and Danny Garcia enters the ring to challenge Errol Spence Jr. Would have been very exciting if it was somebody that wasn't Danny Garcia. Yeah, I don't want to disrespect him like that. But Errol Spence just came off of a great showcase where he beat a top guy in the division, a champion in the division, in a dogfight that was close and was a split decision. He just came off of the win of his career so far. Not exaggerating at all. The win of his career so far. And then somebody of much smaller, much easier competition comes up and calls you out. I don't know. That's just not a good look. Not a good look for Garcia. Like Spence, there's nothing you can do about that. Spence looks great. Porter looks great. The only conversation about them after this fight is how great they looked. But Danny Garcia looks dumb. Like Danny Garcia is not Sean Porter. And I think Danny Garcia might have been a few years ago is not what Danny Garcia is right now. So, I don't know. I'm not interested in an Errol Spence Danny Garcia fight. That would be fine to be the next fight. It's sort of like how we've been talking about. Champions don't need to just fight champions all the time. You got to have opponents in there. Errol Spence doesn't need to fight Manny Pacquiao or Terrence Crawford next, right? Like, those would be good fights to make, and we'll see if they happen in the future, but they don't have to be next. So Danny Garcia is a fine opponent to be next, but I don't, with this whole call-out thing, it's as if they're hyping that, like that's the next big challenge, when it's not. Like, Errol Spence met his challenge, and if he wants to fight Danny Garcia, that's fine, but nobody's going to pretend like that's a pay-per-view fight. Fox will probably pretend like that's a pay-per-view fight, to be honest. More about Fox pretending things are pay-per-view later on in the show. But it's an okay fight to make. It's not. I don't want to be coming off the fight of the year and talking about Spence Garcia, right? That's the problem with it. Is it's the fight of the year, and they're trying to redirect or Danny Garcia is trying to redirect the conversation to Spence Garcia. No. The only place that we want that conversation to go is Spence Pacquiao and Spence Crawford. Anything less than that is like they're good fights. Those aren't the only two good fights to make. Danny Garcia is certainly a good fight to make for Spence, but that's not we're not licking our chops for that fight like we are with Pacquiao or Crawford. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that's what's next for Spence. Realistically, I would love for it to be Pacquiao or Crawford. I mentioned, I think last week, Spence Crawford is probably going to be 2021. I think next year we're going to see Crawford defend his title a few times. We're going to see Spence, probably Danny Garcia, and then maybe unification with Pacquiao. And then 2021, maybe another title defense, and then it'll be the big fight with Crawford, which if they both keep on winning, that's primed to be the perfect time to capitalize on them. If they both keep winning through 2019, which I think Crawford is going to fight, I don't remember when his fight with Kavaliauskas is scheduled, but I think it's going to be 2019, and then they both keep winning and defending their titles through 2020. Then 2021, it'll be a really good-looking fight, and that's what I'm holding out for. I'm not getting my hopes up because of the whole top-rank PBC thing, but that's what I'm hoping for. That's my number one fight to make right now in all of boxing, is Spence Crawford. I don't think there's a better fight you can make right now. There might be fights that you can make for more money. I think Pacquiao and Mayweather 2 would make more money right now, but I don't think that's a very interesting fight. So that's probably what's next for Spence. Another question that I'd like to know is what is next for Porter? People mentioned rematch with Keith Thurman, which I think is interesting because Thurman is coming off of his loss against Manny Pacquiao. Sean Porter is now coming off of a loss with Errol Spence. Would it be really fun to see those two fight? Yes. I would love to see that rematch because I think that Porter is at a level that he wasn't at the first time he fought Thurman. But I don't think that's going to happen. And I think it would be a fun fight to watch, but I don't really want that to happen. It's sort of like, you don't really want two contenders fighting each other. You don't want those two guys fighting each other. You want them fighting Terrence Crawford and Manny Pacquiao, right? Like, if Spence Pacquiao doesn't happen next, Sean Porter is the perfect opponent for Pacquiao to defend his title, right? But Porter Thurman is a perfectly okay fight, and if it happens, I'll watch it. But that's not. I don't want that for each other. I think it's a dangerous fight for no payoff is the big thing. Neither of them have a belt anymore. Both of them are dangerous. Both of them are top guys in the division. Why would they fight each other without getting a belt? Right? I mean, you could say for legacy, but that's silly. What they're going to get for each other is not going to mean as much to their legacy as if they become champion again. So I think those guys are going to be pursuing title shots. They're going to be their next fights will both be with like some lower level guys, to show that they still have time left in their careers. Thurman is out for the rest of the year anyways. We'll see what he does in 2020. Sean Porter, I expect to fight somebody, like maybe like a top 20 guy, but not a top 10 guy in welterweight. Beat him, so then everybody can talk about, oh, does Porter deserve a Spence rematch? Yes, he does, by the way. I don't think that'll be next, but if they start talking about Porter-Spence rematch, that would be an okay conversation too. I don't think that'll be next. I'm not sure if they have a rematch clause or anything like that. I doubt it. It didn't seem like they did. But if Porter wins a couple fights and Spence wins a couple fights, a Porter-Spence rematch conversation would definitely be open, because that was a great fight, and it was a fight that Porter could have won. Didn't win, but he came close. So with a big welterweight unification, I think it's probably pretty appropriate to take a look at the welterweight rankings and see, maybe what's going to happen next. At number 1, I have Terrence Crawford. A very good argument could be made for Errol Spence. A decent argument could be made for Manny Pacquiao. Those guys are the top 3, for sure. I have it Crawford, Errol Spence, Manny Pacquiao for the top 3 guys. But it's very much right now in the realm of we need to see them fight each other. Which is what we like. This is the perfect place to be. We're in the exact same place with heavyweight, and it's the most exciting part, is that there's not one guy who's clearly number 1, because that doesn't make for an interesting division. It's like lightweight has a lot of good fighters, but Loma is clearly number 1. There's a lot of interesting things that can happen at lightweight, and I'm not saying it's a boring division, but it's not as good and as fun to watch as welterweight, because these 3 guys need to fight each other for there to be a clear, undisputed number 1 at welterweight. There isn't. There's a lot of gray area. Is it Crawford? Is it Spence? Is it Pacquiao? Those conversations are all reasonable because they haven't fought each other, and they need to. And we're having the same conversations at heavyweight, and it's exciting. We love to see this in boxing. People say, oh, we want them to be undisputed. We want the top guy, but that's not true. We want the process of finding out who that top guy is. We want the fights that prove it. We don't want Muhammad Ali to just be the best. We wanted him to beat George Foreman, to beat Joe Frazier, after losing to Joe Frazier. Those fights are what made his legacy. And right now we're in a spot where Manny Pacquiao pretty much already has a legacy, and if he falls off, it'll be because he's old. So really, it's the Spence and Crawford era. This is their time to say, this is my era, this is my legacy, and that's the exciting stuff to watch in boxing. So I can't wait to see what happens in welterweight in the future. I hope it'll be them fighting each other and not us years from now talking about the Crawford and Spence fight that never happened. I can't imagine anything more disappointing than talking about Crawford and Spence never happening. So Crawford, Spence, Pacquiao. That's 1, 2, 3. That's how I have it. Then 4, 5 is tricky, because for 4, 5, 6, I got Sean Porter, I got Keith Thurman, and then Euryndis Ugas, I think, is kind of a wild card who could do something fun. But the thing is, I don't know who's at 4 and who's at 5. Is it Porter or Thurman at 4 or 5? So both of them are coming off of a loss, but neither of them looked particularly bad. Neither of them got knocked out. You could say that Thurman was dominated by Pacquiao, and I'd say, kind of. Pacquiao definitely won, but Spence definitely won against Porter. I'd say Porter looked better against Spence than Thurman did against Pacquiao, and I'd say that Spence is a better fighter than Pacquiao. So there's a lot of there's a lot of conversation to be had about who is got that number 4 spot in the division. Is it Thurman or is it Porter? They're both former champs. They both could still have a ways to go in the division. I think a lot of people are going to give it to Porter because of how good he looked in the fight. Which is fair, but to me that's not how rankings work. You don't get to go up in the rankings because you looked good in a loss. You go up in my opinion of you. You go up and you do get a moral victory, and that stuff's all important. But for official rankings, like, you lost, so that affects your ranking in the same way as if you got knocked out, right? It's just one, it's one loss, or it's one more loss. So it's not like Jean Porter loses and we're like, oh, he sucks, he's not even top 10. Like, if he got knocked out, we wouldn't be saying, oh, he sucks, he's not even top 10. He'd still be top 5, right? Because that would just speak to how good Spence is, not to Porter being bad. So it's a conversation right now. Who is the number 4 guy, Porter or Thurman? I think really we can kind of throw them together and we'll see what they do in their careers next, right? If you look at records, you've got Porter is 30-3-1, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, and Keith Thurman is 29-1. So those are pretty. That I think Thurman has the better record, but Porter has a perfectly great record, a fantastic record. So I don't know. And also it's worth mentioning that Thurman beat Porter already, but that was already now a couple years ago. So it's an interesting time for welterweight. There's a lot of ground that can be claimed by one guy stepping up and claiming the ground. So we love this time in welterweight. It's very exciting. 2020 and 2021 are going to be welterweight years, hopefully, if the boxing politics doesn't stand in the way of boxing. So that's welterweight. That's what happened over the weekend. Let's talk about the news in the boxing world. There's a lot of bullcrap news about this fighter says this thing about this fighter, and I have no stomach for it. It's not real news. It's not actually worth covering when another fighter calls another fighter a name or says he's a bum or something. It's like they're just talking. We can let that go. In real news, it is confirmed. We kind of already knew this, but now it's legitimately confirmed that Deontay Wilder will take on Luis Ortiz again, November 23rd, the rematch. After this, he should be fighting Tyson Fury. That's what all the reports say, but he's got to go through Ortiz first. So let's not look past Ortiz. This is an interesting bit of news to me. We've got Wilder and Ortiz and fighting again. The interesting thing about this is that Wilder knocked out Ortiz, right? Like, he clearly won. Ortiz hurt Wilder a few rounds before, or the round before. I don't remember exactly which round it was. But Ortiz hurt Wilder. Ortiz put up a great performance, was winning the fight on the cards, I believe. But Wilder knocked him out. Wilder proved to us what he does against Luis Ortiz. Wilder proved who he is as a fighter. And that's fine if you think Ortiz then from there took the necessary steps to deserve a rematch, but I don't think that. They're treating this like it's a controversial the first fight was somehow controversial and we need to address it. Like the Tyson Fury fight, where that was very controversial. There is a lot of things you can say about that fight. And the rematch needs to happen so we can address how we really feel about those two fighters. Whereas Luis Ortiz and Deontay Wilder, it's not like that at all. Deontay Wilder knocked him out, and Luis Ortiz has won, I think, 3 fights since then, but he hasn't won against really, top opponents, and he hasn't won in a way that's really telling that, he needs a rematch. If anything, Luis Ortiz looks like after he lost to Deontay Wilder, his career ended. And I hate to say that. I don't want to count out Ortiz because he's a good guy, but he's older now, and I think that he doesn't have it. So I'm less interested in this rematch with Deontay Wilder. But the most disappointing about that thing, because all of that is fine, you can still make that fight with it being that way. I don't mind that you're rematching a guy that you clearly beat. He's still a top guy in heavyweight. It's still an interesting fight. It's still not a fight you can look past. Ortiz could still do damage. So it's fine to make that fight. And again, it was fine that he fought Dominic Breazeale, who's not even as good as Luis Ortiz. That's a perfectly fine fight to make. The problem is that the crooks at PBC, or they're either crooks or they're completely mad, they have made this a pay-per-view, which the first fight for Wilder Ortiz was not pay-per-view, and this fight is far less interesting. This is a way less interesting matchup now than it was when they fought the first time, March of last year. We already saw Wilder knock out Ortiz. We don't really have a reason to believe that anything is going to go any differently this time around. And that's fine. Deontay Wilder wants to make a statement to Tyson Fury and to the boxing world. He wants to knock out Luis Ortiz again and be like, I'm the top guy in heavyweight, which is awesome. Good for him. And then he goes to take on Tyson Fury, which is what the sport needs. And then, whoever wins that fight can really be cemented as the heavyweight champ. It's great. What Deontay Wilder is doing is makes sense, but what doesn't make sense is the fact that this is a pay-per-view fight. It's not. Wilder versus Breazeale was not a pay-per-view fight, and nobody was upset. Nobody was like, oh, they should charge money for that. And this is not a pay-per-view fight. The first one wasn't a pay-per-view fight. This one's not a pay-per-view fight. It's crazy. It's absolutely insane. I doubt they're going to get any kind of numbers for this. We're approaching Terrence Crawford, Amir Khan level numbers, which should not have been a pay-per-view fight. And, the people who bought that fight proved it. And I think this is going to be the same thing. This should not be a pay-per-view fight, and people are not going to buy it. The one saving grace that this has is apparently Leo Santa Cruz is on the undercard. He's going to be defending his title against Miguel Flores, which that's not it's not like that's a really big fight to help the pay-per-view out, so it still should not be a pay-per-view, but that is exciting to see Leo Santa Cruz back in the ring again. So yeah, Deontay Wilder pay-per-view against Luis Ortiz. Don't waste your money. I hate to say it, but if you are not one of those people who tries to find fights online for free, which I'm not saying that I endorse, but if you are planning on paying for this pay-per-view, I wouldn't recommend it. I don't think it's going to be worth it. However, if Luis Ortiz knocks Deontay Wilder out, you cannot hold that against me. It's just my opinion. But I don't think that'll happen. I think we're going to see the same fight, only it's going to be more one-sided. It's going to be a Deontay Wilder fight, and we're going to see Luis Ortiz doesn't have it anymore. And Luis Ortiz, prove me wrong. I hope you do. I hope you give us a show. I hope you prove me wrong, and at the Sunday after that fight, I'm on here talking about, wow, I was so wrong. That was a great fight, worth every penny. But I don't think that's what I'll be saying. We'll see. I hope I'm proven wrong. Other bit of news that came out is on that very same weekend, on that very same day. It's going to be a fun day, November 23rd. Mark your calendars. It's a Boxing Day. That very same day, Callum Smith is taking on John Ryder to defend his titles. This is exciting because anytime Callum Smith fights, it's exciting. But John Ryder is a good fighter. It's one of those things where I don't think he's going to lose this fight. I think Callum Smith is clearly the favorite. I'm sure all the bookies in Vegas and everywhere will agree with me that Callum Smith is the favorite. But Ryder is at the level where you can't count him out. He is a good fighter. He has stuff. So it's a fun fight to make. It'll be a fun fight to watch. I think Callum Smith edges it out, but Ryder's not a pushover. Ryder is, he's a contender. He deserves this shot. He's the mandatory challenger for Smith. In case you didn't know that, and it should be really fun to see this fight. I can't wait. I can't wait to see what else is going to be on the card. It's Matchroom. Eddie Hearn, he usually puts together pretty good cards. Sometimes they get a little bit slow, but usually I find that Matchroom has got the best cards. They put really talented guys in the undercard. So that should be fun. It's going to be in Liverpool, which hopefully means the timing will work out to where we can watch this card and then flip over to Deontay Wilder, and which is going to be in Vegas, and we won't miss much. We might miss like an undercard fight on Deontay Wilder or something, and that would be great. I love when I can watch both. So that is the news. Some exciting fights coming down the pipeline, which brings me to another topic that I want to discuss is, was I wrong about 2019? Because I've been sitting here all year talking about that it's kind of an off year for boxing, fights aren't happening, but that was definitely true in the first half. But in this second half, we got Spence Porter, Deontay Wilder, Ortiz, which, it's not a pay-per-view, but a good fight. We've got Triple G, who I'm about to talk about, is fighting Derevyanchenko, who, I'm butchering that name, I bet. Callum Smith, John Ryder coming up. I think Crawford Kavaliauskas is going to happen this year. We had Andy Ruiz beat AJ in a massive upset, biggest upset we've seen in years, and they're going to be rematching in December. So I think it's safe to say that I underestimated how good 2019 was going to be. It's not like the best year of boxing or anything even close to that, but it's a fun year. So good job 2019, turning it around there at the end. Or we'll see how all of these fights, they could all be boring as shit, but I doubt it. So good on you 2019. Next week, we have 2 cards of note. October 5th, Saturday, we've got on Showtime, Clarissa Shields taking on Ivana Habazin. I don't know much about Habazin, and I'm probably butchering that name, so Ivana, I apologize. Clarissa Shields is good. She's got power. I'm excited to see where she goes. Personal opinion, this is a skippable fight and a skippable card. I'm not trying to disrespect Shields at all. I think, watch the highlights, but I think Clarissa Shields is going to have another victory. She's going to be 10-0, I think, after she beats Habazin, and 10-0. So I don't know. I wouldn't tune into that, because probably at the same time on DAZN in Madison Square Garden, New York, we've got Gennady Golovkin against Sergey Derevinchenko. I'm messing that up. Derevinchenko. This is exciting. This is fun. So a few weeks ago, or maybe it was last week, we talked briefly about Canelo kind of dissing Triple G for not fighting anybody. It's like, I got nothing to gain from a trilogy fight. And I said, that's 100% true. But Triple G is he's fighting for the IBF and the IBO, which who cares about the IBO, but he's fighting for two middleweight titles, and he's fighting against top-notch competition. Derevinchenko is not a joke. He's a good fighter. His only loss is to Danny Jacobs, who is also a really good guy. So Triple G could be, I think this is the start of his comeback, or this can be the start of his comeback. What will happen with Triple G going forward, we'll see. But this is the fight I'm going to be watching over the weekend. Not a whole lot to talk about on the undercard, sadly. Again, I was just talking about Matchroom and how good it is, but this is, there's some, we got some interesting fights on the undercard. I would recommend watching as much of it as you can, but I don't think there's not anything that we're going to be talking about for a while. But it's a perfectly fine card. The Triple G fight is the big one that we're going to be talking about. And Triple G might be coming back to be middleweight king again. He might be coming back with a vengeance, or he could show that his time is over. I mean, he had a Hall of Fame career, but it's a done deal. We'll see what happens with Triple G. That's exciting. That, in my opinion, is more exciting than Clarissa Shields. No offense, Clarissa. We'll see you next time when you have a little bit tougher opposition. But, take care of business against Habazin, and best of luck. So that's what's happening in the boxing world. That's what's happening next week. Next week, I'm sure we'll have a bit of a middleweight conversation with Triple G. I'm sure that'll happen naturally. We'll talk about what's going on in middleweights. This week and last week was definitely the welterweights show. And it's an exciting thing to talk about. So next week, look out for a middleweight conversation. And look out for Triple G. What's he got? Does he still have the power that we know Triple G has had in the past? Is he still the top guy in middleweight? Those are the questions that are going to be answered over the weekend. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought, what you want me to talk about. Any questions or comments, feel free to leave them. And I hope you guys have a great week. We'll see you next time.